Hello students, I am Deepika Bhandari. Today I bring you the next learning lecture on behalf of the content writers, Dr. G.S. Sodhi and myself, on an important unit of paper Crime and Society, that is criminal profiling. Dear students, in this lecture we will learn about the concept of criminal profiling and the principle used by the criminal profilers when they are profiling an offender. We will also acquaint ourselves with the steps and importance of criminal profiling along with a mention of the various drawbacks associated with it. Module 1 Introduction, Module 2 Steps of Criminal Profiling, Module 3 Importance and Drawbacks of Criminal Profiling, Module 4 is the conclusion. Let us begin this episode by discussing what is meant by the term criminal profiling. Since the dawn of mankind, attempts have been made to understand and evaluate the ways to study the manner in which an individual behaves in certain situations. The same applies to studying the behavior of criminals and their criminal psyche. Criminal profiling is an investigative strategy employed by the behavioral scientists or psychologists and criminologists across the world to identify the probable suspects in a particular crime and analyze the patterns in which they accomplish a crime or different types of crimes. This may help to foresee and analyze any future offences that can be committed by that offender. In other words, criminal profiling comprises of the interpretation of criminal characteristics. It is also known as offender profiling. Pete Kismet, a retired FBI criminal profiler, defines criminal profiling as an art of developing behavioral profile of an offender based on evidences from the crime scene and many other factors involved in an investigation of a violent crime. It is curious to know that the forensic criminologists or criminal profilers can predict the characteristics of the criminals on the basis of the statistical models, earlier research or their knowledge and experience. By comprehending why did an individual indulged into a deviant behavior and committed a crime, it can give the investigating officers a hint regarding the motives behind the crime committed. Further, if the profiler is able to ascertain or indicate the intention behind the crime, it becomes easier for the investigating officers to nab down the suspect. The criminal profilers can use evidences collected during the investigation, such as from the scene of crime, to make presumptions about physical characteristics, use analytical logistics, critical philosophy, or use scientific methods to make the interpretations about the criminal's interpersonal and psychological characteristics in accordance with the examination of the crime scene. It is interesting to note that criminal profiling and interrelated methods were established as tools to be used during the investigation. Helping in the identification of suspects, it can prove highly crucial during criminal investigations and help in decreasing the ambiguity surrounding the offender and crime scene. Let us now learn about the how and when did the first criminal profile came into existence and how the methodology and the concept of criminal profiling has evolved over the years. Although the practice of criminal profiling has been recognized for many years in several forms, the term criminal profiling was first placed into consistent use by the forensic analysts. They used it to refer to the practice by virtue of which they arrived to certain specific conclusions about the characteristics of criminal from their activities that they commissioned during the crime. In its most elementary form, criminal profiling is an inferential process that embarrasses the investigation of criminal behavior, their dealings with the crime scene and the victim during the crime. The criminal profiling methodologies existed as early as the Middle Ages, with the investigators trying to profile the offenders. The detectives of the Metropolitan Police etched the first criminal profile in the year 1888 on the personality of a serial killer infamously known as Jack the Ripper, who was involved in a series of unsolved homicides in London, England. He was a serial killer who had murdered a series of prostitutes in the 1880s. Dr. Thomas Bond of the Metropolitan Police, who was then probing this case, was asked to give his outlook on the extent of the murderer's surgical skill and knowledge. His assessment was based on his own examination of the most extensively mutilated victim and the post-mortem notes from the 4 previous acknowledged murders, wherein the culprit would rip apart the abdomen of the victims. Dr. Bond also tried to reconstruct the murder and interpret the behavioral pattern of the offender and came up with a profile, that is, a signature personality traits of the offender. Within the past 2 decades, there has been an increased use of profiling, although it remains a controversial tool. Not everyone believes that devising a hypothetical portrait of a suspect contributes towards solving crimes, but some profiles have been surprisingly accurate. One such criminal profile will be discussed later in this episode. The law enforcement agencies, however, are somehow beginning to realize the benefits of this technique as a viable investigative tool. The purpose or the objective of a criminal profile is to help a police investigation narrow down the search for the perpetrator of a crime. A profile that can provide a rough estimation of the age, type of profession, education or knowledge in accordance with the manner in which the crime has been committed, that is, in a skilled or a crude manner, and behavioral information can be great benefit to the investigating officers, ensuring their investigative efforts are in the right direction. If the investigators are aware of this profile, they could be pre-informed about the potential suspects and possible links, which could aid and speed up the investigation altogether. An understanding of the psychology of an offender brings insights as to how they may have behaved at the scene of crime. For example, whether they have taken with them items from the scene of crime or from the victim directly to misguide the investigation, etc. These acts as a reminder about the offender and are oftentimes called as the souvenirs that the criminal has left at the crime scene. This information is forwarded on to the investigating officers and can be used to interrogate the criminals and to know whether they have committed other crimes or were about to. An understanding of psychology, how different criminals may think about different things, their crimes or their victims, their attitudes, responses and behaviors can be of a humongous benefit during the investigation. Let us now try to understand about the methodology followed while profiling behavioral pattern of a criminal and their various objectives. The methodology is distributed under 2 phases. First is investigative phase and second is trial phase. The investigative phase comprises of discriminating features of the unknown criminal for the known crime. This phase is associated with the conventional concepts of profiling. Let us learn about the important objectives in the investigative phase. These include assessing the nature and significance of forensic and behavioral evidence to a particular crime or a sequence of correlated crimes, reducing the sustainable suspect group in a criminal investigation, arranging the investigation leads into probable suspects, linking the hypothetically related crimes by ascertaining crime scene indicators and behavioral patterns, that is modus operandi and signature, evaluating the potential of the criminal behavior to turn graver or into more intense crimes, making the investigators available with indications and strategies that can aid the investigation, and lastly, help in keeping the inclusive investigation on track and undistracted. We will now learn about the second phase. The second phase is recognized as the trial phase. It involves providing information about a crime or sequence of crimes for which there is an alleged criminal. During the trial phase of an investigation, a profiler's objectives are to appraise the nature and value of forensic and behavioral evidences to a particular crime or series of related crimes, develop questioning or cross-examination methods, support and develop an understanding of criminal fictions and impulses, develop perception into criminal purpose and intent before, during and after the commission of a crime, link potentially related crimes by identifying crime scene indicators and behavior patterns. The objective of criminal profiling or offender profiling is to help converge the field of investigation, basic assumptions, etc. regarding an offender's behavior at the crime scene that reveals the consistencies in the personality of the offender and methods that he or she adopts in committing a crime. When a criminal profiler profiles a criminal, he or she makes a certain assumptions. They presume that the criminal's behavior is a result of the way he or she thinks and their characteristics. However, this presumption is not always flawless, as sometimes the behavior of the criminal may be a result of the apparent situations or environment where he or she had committed the crime. Let us take an example to understand this concept better. Consider a criminal who had initially gone with the motive of robbing a house without causing any harm or damage to the housemates. But in a turn of events, he is attacked or seen by the people in the house. So, in order to protect his identity, he may end up fatally injuring the housemates, which earlier was nowhere part of his plan. Therefore, it is the duty of a criminal profiler to infiltrate a behavior that is indicative of a person rather than of the situation. Let us learn about the different steps or stages involved when an offender profiler develops a criminal profile. These are as follows. First, profiling inputs. Second, decision processing. Third, crime assessment. Fourth, offender profile. And fifth, investigative use. Let us learn about these one by one. Profiling inputs. This step involves collecting all the information that is available about the crime. Here, the background information about the offender and the victim, such as professional backgrounds, friends and family, habits, social status, criminal history, if any, is very important. Decision processing. The next step in criminal profiling is decision processing. In this step, all the information that has been collected during the previous step is sorted to classify it according to the type of crime and style. A correct classification and sorting of evidences will help the profiler in determining the further course of investigation. After summarizing and sorting the information collected in the previous steps, the crime assessment is done. The fundamental aim of this stage is to construct the sequence of events that happened before, during and after the crime under investigation was committed. This is used to determine the behavior of both victim and the offender. The next step is the offender profile. This step focuses on conjecturing about the type of person who could have accomplished that crime. The offender profile thus created will include the information that describes the criminal. This may include the gender, the probable age, the motive that has been concluded based on the information collected, etc. The last stage caters to the ways in which the offender profile that has thus been developed will aid the investigation. It will help the investigating officers in finding the criminal and during the interrogation procedure. After having learnt about the different steps involved in criminal profiling, it is crucial to learn about the different approaches that are undertaken by a profiler. The manner in which an investigating officer or a criminologist portrays a criminal's profile depends on the type of crime committed, the severity and the circumstances, etc., in which the culprit accomplished the crime. It also caters to the skill of the profiler and type and number of facts furnished before him at the time of profiling. Traditionally, there are two ways in which a criminal or offender profiler can approach or develop a profile of a criminal. These are inductive criminal profiling and deductive criminal profiling. Let us discuss about these two approaches one by one. Inductive criminal profiling. An inductive argument provides a conclusion that is prepared likely or a matter of probability by posing subsidiary argumentation. This includes aspects like physical and behavioral evidence, research outcomes, or even profiler's skill and proficiency. A good inductive argument will provide strong support for the conclusion offered, but this still does not make an argument accurate. In reality, even the best inductive argument is a generalization, hypothesis or philosophy that conjectures substantiation through analysis. A crucial identifying feature of inductive profiles is stressing the probabilistic nature of the assessment. Apart from this perspective, two of the issues that may seriously affect the generalizability of any statistical data used to generate inductive theories are sample size and research methodology. Deductive criminal profiling. The deductive method of criminal profiling, in contrast, is more similar to what is emphasized in the media. The information about the criminal in question comes directly from an analysis of the crime scene. Deductive profiling depends on a more scientific and organized progression whereby criminal characteristics are a direct extension of the available physical and behavioral evidence. According to this, if the principles are true, then the conclusions must also be true. As a deductive argument is well organized, the conclusion is discretely contained within the proposition, and unless the reasoning is invalid, the conclusion follows as a matter of course. A deductive argument is designed in a manner that it takes us from fact to fact. In profiling, deduction draws on the scientific method, which is a logical step-by-step procedure involving observations and experimentation in problem solving. While inductive profiles can be easy and quick to develop, A profiler using the deductive method could take many weeks or months to build a full criminal profile. The crime scene is vital in this approach and therefore must be left undisturbed until it has been fully analysed by the officer. Brent Torvey argues that in most cases during the investigative phase, about 4 relevant offender characteristics may be deductively concluded from crime scene behaviour. These are skill of the criminal, knowledge of the victim, knowledge of the crime scene and knowledge of materials and methods. However, it was observed that although only 4 characteristics are relevant for determining a suspect, after which the person is located during the trial phase, there would be supplementary questions of forensic interest regarding the crime scene and about the criminal that may be of further value to the court. Whereas, at the other end of this discussion is Gebruth, who gave a comprehensive list that could be determined from the scene of crime that included the name, age, gender, height, weight, marital status, education, social and economic status, and any abnormality, physical or psychological, living conditions, etc. This list is consistent with other criminal traits and emotional states. Criminal profiling also has several benefits to criminologists, psychologists and law enforcement agencies because it can help in determining the type of suspect the police should search for. Criminal profiling is often used with vicious crimes like rape, murder, etc. Due to these dreadful violent crimes, profiling can help the investigating officers save their crucial time by knowing the psychological and behavior patterns of the perpetrator. This process can help with narrowing down the culprit's next move or the whereabouts of the suspect in question and potentially save more lives. With strengths and benefits associated with criminal profiling, there are also certain liabilities and limitations. A limitation in criminal profiling is assuming certain specific predictions about offenders and suspects based on data from previous cases, rendering it as biased. Incorrect information interpreted from criminal profiling can lead to false positive or false negative results. The investigators may find a suspect who appears to fit an incorrect profile and ignore or stop investigating other leads. Further, in case of a false negative result, the profile can yield incorrect information, which could persuade the investigators to ignore a suspect who is actually guilty. Although criminal profiling is often used as a tool in criminal investigations, it lacks pragmatic evidence to initiate its frequent usage in criminal investigation. Therefore, the investigator must weigh all the facts and evidences recovered, analyze the criminal profile, previously traced or develop one, thoroughly and then conclude his findings regarding the characteristics and psyche of the offender. Let us now conclude this episode on criminal profiling. Criminal profiling comprises the interpretation of criminal characteristics. It can be crucial to criminal investigators, but it is not perfect as there is no standard parameter by which we can predict any or all sorts of human behavior in different situations. Although we can examine decisions and patterns made in the past to create a likely solution that would work in identifying the pattern in which criminals commit the crime. It, however, may snag the innocent as well. Nevertheless, criminal profiling has been successfully used in tracking down unknown suspects and solving many crimes around the world. The question whether it is a perfect psychological science depends on our individual perspectives, efficiency, and by weighing its pros and cons. We can decide on our own the merits of this practice. With all this information, here we come to the end of today's lecture. Do keep in mind that what we have discussed today, this is time for your self-study. If you want to learn more for enhancing your knowledge, you may log on to our website www.cec.nic.in for multiple choice questions, quiz and LORs. Till then, keep studying. Goodbye.